of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Fission radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Hello. Somehow I must have got the boot.
This is...
Hello.
Good morning, Shizazz. Good morning, UCY. I'm having troubles, I'm very, very computer illiterate, and I'm having problems here. I'm trying to find out if I am being heard over in UCY right now. I'm waiting for somebody to acknowledge me. I don't know if anybody's listening to me, but could you acknowledge the fact that I'm being heard? And we'll go forward. I'm not getting any acknowledgement over there. Jesus, I don't know. Am I being heard?
In the chat?
Yeah, I'm sitting in chat right now.
Yes,
and
in the deal here.
Okay, hang on. Good morning. Welcome to Amateur Radio. There's the link for the chat there. If you go in there. Okay, so you can't hear me. They apparently can't hear us. It's just okay. Um, oh, what a way to start a radio show. Well, good morning, guys, and thanks for tuning in. Well, first off, I want to say thanks to UCY for giving me this platform to share some of our thoughts on a Friday morning. I appreciate the opportunity, and sorry for the rough start here, guys, but that's amateur radio for us. But anyways, I am joined today by Shizazz, and you know what? In the whole world today, there's very few people I enjoy talking with more than Shizazz. The guy absolutely is adamant about sharing information about free energy with people and trying to get the word out. And I was talking to Shizazz. You know, it's funny. I was talking to Shizazz before the show here today, and it's something I've seen in my local community now, where young guys in the age of 20 to 30 years old are really starting to get involved in conversations about free energy. And you know, these kind of conversations weren't going on with these people a couple of years ago, but the young people seem to really be paying attention to the fact that I believe, and you believe, Shizazz, that free energy is the reality, of course. But they are starting to pay attention. That to me is really kind of it's really brought a lot of enthusiasm into me, the fact that young people are starting to pay attention to such a vital issue. And of course, you being a guy that has really spent his life working on free energy, I think I'm free to say that. I couldn't think of a better guy to get in today. Welcome to the show, Shizazz, and nice to talk to you again, buddy.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, I think we've proven over and over and over again that energy is free. You know, the device, in order to be able to tap into it, now that's a different question. Of course, you got to spend some money to build a generator. But if you actually look at it, when's the last time you ever got a bill from the sun or the wind or a river or, you know, all of nature's forces? We got every single piece of the puzzle literally right now to build the perfect machines, and it's just a matter of trying to get somebody together to do it. The corporations out there, you know, they make inefficient stuff. We already know that. I mean, they make light bulbs that burn out. We got fluorescent lights. As long as that fluorescent light never, the vacuum seal on that bulb never goes bad, and it still maintains a vacuum inside there, even without the tungsten elements, you can take a dead fluorescent bulb that won't work in the average system, and you can energize it with high frequency. That light bulb will literally last forever until the vacuum's gone and the material inside of it's all depleted, which is an impossibility. It's all still there. So, you know, we could literally build lighting systems that would never fail. And so if you think about the implications of that, obviously you can't sell more light bulbs if everybody's got a light bulb that ain't never going to fail, right? So, you know, it's not that we can't do it. It's that society, the corporations and the companies and
that's not good. Yeah, but you know, of course, that's not good for repeat business.
Yeah, and so if you want to talk about, you know, conserving resources of the world, I would say that you want to start making things that would last longer. I mean, I've got a original Edison light bulb that still to this very day works. Why is that? When you can go to the store and you could buy a tungsten element light bulb, maybe get an hour out of it, maybe get a year or so out of it, but eventually you turn the light on and it just blows out. They weren't made the same way. The tungsten isn't as thick as what he had back in the day or whatever. For whatever reason, they made them light bulbs to where they'd burn out. You know, they call it planned obsolescence. So, you know, if it breaks down, then you can sell a new one, right? Or have somebody fix it. But it ain't because we can't do it. It's, you know, for obvious money. Huh? I see you talking, but I'm not hearing you. But that's the whole thing, man. All these machines that we use out here, they're made inefficiently right out of the gate. And so with that said, you know, we have lots of room for improvement. If we're going to reduce our so-called carbon footprint, which you know how I feel about that, the whole global warming debacle, scam, or whatever. But if we're ever to do that, then we got to get a little bit more wise on our products that we buy. It's as simple as that.
Well, we know, hey, they've got something better now. She says they've got light bulbs full of mercury. Isn't that a great idea? Well, the most toxic substance in the world. And now they want to fill our light bulbs full of them.
Yeah,
and have them in our
crazy.
houses. Isn't that a great idea?
The dangers of mercury.
The insanity of it.
You know, there's a saying that goes way back there. The hat makers used to use mercury in the process of making hats, and even some gold miners still to this day actually use mercury to separate the gold. And they usually end up going insane. You know, there's mad as a hatter is what they said.
Yeah.
So you'd think you wouldn't want these mercury bulbs around because of that particular reason. But there's other noble gases out there that can do the same exact job as mercury but not be dangerous. So why aren't we using those? That's the question. You know, look how many noble gases there are. Argon, halogen, neon. Let me look them up. I'm going to make sure I get them all right there. Doggone it. So
the fact is that the technology's there, that they could make light bulbs, like you said, that would last forever, but that's not good for repeat business. And the fact that now they want to fill them full of mercury, and this mercury is going to end up in our landfills, and it's going to end up in our water and in our food system. It's inevitable, is insanity, absolute insanity. Well, but it's just insanity on top of insanity we see coming from people on top.
You were talking earlier about nuclear power. You know, really, it's kind of ridiculous that we're using kind of like modern technology with ancient technology and expecting not to have problems. And so, with that said, we're still boiling water and to make steam in order to turn turbines, in order to turn generators to get electrical power, which is ridiculous. We can do the same thing with argon. All right? We don't need hot radioactive rods in order to be able to boil water. I mean, we can use high-frequency radio waves to boil water. I mean, it's done on a daily basis. Just about every household out there has a microwave oven, and you see it only takes a couple minutes to boil water in the microwave oven. And with that said, you know, you could build a plasma reactor system that would take the heat off of, because what is radiation? Radiation isn't nothing more than exciting all the molecules to the extent that they produce friction, which in turn produces heat. See, when you put those radioactive rods in there, it's the radioactive decay that is doing the equivalence of what the microwave oven's doing. See what I'm saying? And so when you have a problem such as a breach in the system, you don't have to worry about radioactive contamination. And there's a key word we got to get out, because we got to hopefully let people understand the differences. Water does not become radioactive, all right? It becomes radioactively contaminated by small particles of radioactive material. The water itself is the most stable molecule on the planet. You don't got to worry about the water itself becoming radioactive. And we've actually got systems where we could filter radioactive particulates out of the water. I mean, for Pete's sake, they sell some on Amazon and eBay. And so, you know, all this stuff about how Fukushima keeps putting they're pumping radioactive water into these tanks, and they keep on pumping it. They should have been from the get-go filtering this water, distilling it, or whatever. There's so many different methods by which to take heavy contaminants out of water that it's ridiculous. But nonetheless, if they're just dumping it out there, then these little particles would get into the water supply. You know, fish eat up in the process of trying to breathe and eating food or whatever, get that down inside the fish, and now you got, you know, little radioactive particulates inside the fish. Of course, we all know where it goes from there.
Well, we all know that the ocean's being affected by radiation. That's not a deniable fact anymore. But I've been, you know, one of the things that I do study, and I hope I'm coming through okay, because I know I got a bad connection.
Yeah, I hear you great.
Yeah, next week I'm going to have this problem fixed with my internet. I'm getting a strong Wi-Fi in here on Tuesday. But anyways, all that being said, a lot of my time is spent studying Fukushima, and there's a lot of BS coming out, but there's a lot of facts coming out about Fukushima. And the number one thing that seems to be a concern on everybody's mind right now is the number 4 reactor and the 1,500 spent fuel rods that are being stored in the pools there. Also, the fact that they've taken the core of the reactor and actually put it in the storage pool. If that pool was subjected to another seismic activity right now, the results could be absolutely catastrophic. So, to me, nuclear power is just a ticking time bomb. It's absolute insanity what we're doing with nuclear power.
It's pure ridiculousness. Now, we got methods by which we can control the radioactive decay of the material. There's control rods out there that you can literally use that material. Let me see if I can find. Here it is. The materials in the control rods are. Doggone it. Trying to find it. I just had it right in front of my face. Anyway, basically, it controls. It absorbs the neutrons and release. It's like boron, had hafnium, cadmium, silver, and a bunch of other different materials that will actually grab up the isotopes as they're being released from the natural decay of the radioactive material. So there's actually ways to keep that under control. So, they have control rods inside the reactor that they bring up and down in order to cut out some of the heat that's created by the release of the radioactive decay. And so I would be saying this: if you got this deal inside there, instead of putting more water in there, you should be dumping tons of this material that absorbs the radioactive decay. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
To bring that temperature under control to where you don't have to worry about a hydrogen explosion. And that's exactly what usually ends up happening.
Right.
Is that when you take and you overheat the water, eventually you'll get a separation of the hydrogen and oxygen. And that separation of the hydrogen and oxygen will actually create an electrical charge. That's how some fuel cells work.
Right.
By breaking it apart, you get electric charge, and by them recombining, you get electric charge. And that little electric charge is enough to pretty much ignite the hydrogen and oxygen that is now superheated into super pressurized steam, and then pow, you get a hydrogen explosion, which takes and blows up all that contaminated water and disperses it into the environment.
Lovely.
To me, that's pretty much, that's insanity. That's basically like playing Russian roulette. You never know where that one bullet is.
Well, the whole nuclear industry is Russian roulette. It's absolute insanity. We've talked about it many times where they've built these nuclear power plants and how close they are to striking ranges of major fault lines. These fault lines are going to move again. We're going to see major earthquakes on these fault lines, and it's inevitable. The Earth does not stop doing what it's doing, and yet they build nuclear power plants within striking range of these. In the United States, Shizazz, there's 23 of these Mark 1 design, GE Mark 1 design reactors operating in the United States of America. And every one of those has the potential of another Fukushima if subjected to geological events. It's absolute insanity. The zircolite that they cover these rods with, I was actually Dr. Busby and Dr. Helen Callicott just both released new videos on this. The fact that the way they're storing these rods in the number 4 reactor in the United States, what they do is they'll store a hot rod against a dead rod, so that there's never massive heat being transferred between the rods. But what they've done in Japan is they've stored these rods in these cooling pools, and they're all hot. So the potential for an on-burning fire, like zircolite, will burn, and that's what's covering these fuel rods. And if that ever started going, you get a fire that can't be put out by water. That alone, it would put unbelievable amounts of radiation into our atmosphere.
Well, it could potentially start a chain reaction.
That can't be stopped.
Yeah, but
boom.
The whole thing is if they got this core inside the doggone water, that's first off, that's ridiculous. They should have. They should have taken and literally went out and got tons and tons of all the different materials that could absorb that radioactive decay so that it wouldn't have the potential to heat the water hot enough to create a hydrogen explosion. And even at that, if they was to put sand in there after they put all this control rod material, then they could literally encase that because, at a certain temperature, sand turns into glass.
Right.
They could literally encase that in a big chunk of glass to keep it contained, and as long as the temperature wasn't ever able to pressurize enough to breach the glob, so to speak.
Right. Well, you actually
solutions, Barry, but I don't know what's going on out there. People just ain't got no common sense. They didn't pay attention in basic science or something.
Well, didn't you actually write a letter to the Japanese government with some of these ideas?
Yeah, I wrote letters to presidents of the United States and tried to get them. Look, man, we got a resolution for this. If you want to pay attention for a second, but it's like this: they got these brilliant individuals out there, been college educated and all this kind of jazz, and they have the documentation to say that they're smart. And so, they don't want to listen to the average Joe that paid attention in science class. What they want to do is essentially make themselves appear to be brilliant. Well, first off, you got to explain to me, if you're so doggone brilliant, why didn't you design multiple fail-safes into this system so that nothing could go wrong? I mean, if you're going to be ridiculous and put something in there that is going to continue to heat water, then you need some sort of way in order to have a backup after a backup after a backup so that you don't get a hydrogen explosion. The hydrogen explosion is the big danger of all of it. As far as a complete and utter meltdown in a nuclear mushroom cloud, you ain't never got to worry about that part. What you got to worry about is that pressure and the hydrogen explosion, which would throw all the radioactive contamination in every direction. You see what I'm saying? But there's ways to literally make sure that it could not happen. There's no way possible it could happen. Either way, if they would have used some common sense a long time ago, they already had microwave technology. They could have designed microwave technology to literally do the same exact job for a fraction of the cost and absolutely no amount of danger. The system that I'm talking about, anybody who's ever got a plasma ball in their doggone house, that, those nifty little globes that you can see the little lightning in there and it'll follow your finger around. All right, that's the kind of plasma that I'm talking about. All right, that's where you take gas, argon gas, and you energize it into the fourth state of matter, and so you can get to see visible light. Well, also inside there, it's not just light that's going on inside there. All that argon is energized to the extent that it is producing heat. Light is heat and heat is light is what science tells us. All right, so then that tells you that you could literally use high-frequency waves to which there's so many different frequencies that you can energize gas into the fourth state of matter. It's ridiculous. Nonetheless, instead of using compressed, highly refined radioactive rods to decay, that's what happens when you take what would naturally be naturally decaying radioactive material in nature, like uranium, that you pull right out of the ground. It's already radioactive. They take all this, they refine it, they build these ceramic rods out of them, and these things are so hot because they're so radioactive that they are decaying more rapidly than they would in nature, because nature's trying to balance itself back out.
Right.
And so they're going to continue to get hot. And until that battery runs down, it's going to continue to get hot. And even after, it won't heat the water to the extent that you can turn the water into steam to run the turbines. It's still radioactive. It's still releasing material. And so they got to put them into cooling ponds for like 10 years so that they can decay yet even more. and then turn around once they get down to a certain decay rate, then they can start storing them in containers and then bury them under the ground. So a whole lot of wasted free energy, first off, but it's flat out ridiculousness, because you could take, instead of doing that whole entire process, which is not only expensive, but, can be really dangerous to people. You wouldn't want to hold one of these in your hands, that's for sure. But you could do the same thing with any of the noble gases. And I'm going to have to Google it because I can't remember all the different ones. But all you got to do is Google up the term noble gases. I'll do it right now.
Well, these guys that are running the show here with this Nuclear Regulatory Commission, they must have glass balls to look into the future 10 years to make sure that these cooling ponds aren't going to be hit by a geological event. We see the same thing happen here that we see happening in Japan right now. The potential is unbelievable. Shizazz. It just boggles my mind. It really does. We're planting bombs all over the earth and telling the earth that it can't do what it's been doing for thousands of years. How stupid are we?
Helium, neon, argon, krypton, and xenon are the main ones. Argon, we've been using argon since back in at least the early 1900s for vacuum tubes.
Right.
And if you ever look at doggone vacuum tube, here's an idea. Go out and find you one of them old radios that has tubes in it, tube-type radios, and plug it in for a while, and then reach down there with your fingers and grab a hold of that tube. You're gonna get a blister on your thumb the size of Texas, man.
Well, you know what? People's opinion is going to change in the very near future, because solar, there's some stuff coming down the tubes now in solar that just boggles my mind, like the roofing tiles they're making now, that are going to come available to the North American market here very shortly. Shizazz, I mean, you're talking about putting a roof on your head, that on your house, that will power your house for the next 30 years. They say they have a 30-year expectancy, life expectancy, new tiles they're producing. But right now they're about twice the cost of a conventional asphalt tile. But when you factor in the fact that you'll never be paying a power bill going forward after you hook the system up,
well, let me point something out since you said that.
There's going to be some pretty cool stuff coming down the tube. This is all.
Yeah, let me point something out since you said that, because it's a yay and a nay on that, because here's what's going on. You see what happened with solar power once people started realizing that they could use solar instead of having the on-grid. Well, that was all well and good, and they were all talking about reducing carbon footprint. When they finally got their systems in place, well, then people started lobbying, wait a second, because if they got solar panels on their roof, that's affecting the economy, because the power company ain't going to make as much money. And so what I'm trying to point out to everybody is, look, this is how this is actually going to play out. The free energy devices that we've been talking about forever and a day, they are coming, and they'll be here within the next 10 years, or maybe even less. They are coming. All that technology is coming out on the market. But here's the difference. Are the people going to be controlling that technology, or are the companies and the corporations, power companies, or whatever, fuel industries, are they going to be controlling that technology? You see what I'm saying? Exactly. That's why doing what we're doing here with the free energy radio shows and stuff like that is that you get this information out to everybody and his brother, and they know that there are solutions available in order to generate free electricity. Then you got to be also on your guard about people going and lobbying the governments of the world to try to essentially tax you for the use of solar. I mean, once you bought them solar panels, you shouldn't have to pay no electric bill. You shouldn't have to pay no taxes. You bought that. You're utilizing natural energy from the sun to power your home. But the government talks out their mouth and out the side of their neck at the same time. Oh, first we got to reduce our global warming footprint, and second is we're going to have to actually charge you for free energy, because if we don't, then the people at the power company won't have a job.
Well, I think it's about time the power company became a thing of the past.
That's what I think.
Because, well, what has the power company done for us? What have they done? I mean, they're destroying our planet right now. Our planet dying in front of our eyes because of our conventional means of generating power. But we need a paradigm shift. And boy, I hope that people realize that if this control is ever given to the government, that we'll never get it back. But I'm totally on board with everybody being able to produce their own power. And to hell with you, Mr. Government Officer. And I don't really care if the power company goes down the tube.
You know what my suggestion is? That groups of people get together and they start basically putting together the People's Power Company. And the People's Power Company shared resources until everybody has what they need to produce their own power. And they basically build their own corporation, I guess you'd call it, of the people to control their own power supply. You see what I'm saying?
That's a good idea, Shizazz.
Because otherwise, once they get all these patents on things, they'll probably figure out a way that they can see. Right now, you could actually copy a patent and not sell it. You could just use it for your own personal use, and nobody would be able to do anything about it, because you're not selling it. You're not making money off of it. You're just using it for your own personal use. But at some point, somebody's going to pull one fast one on the people and say that you can't even make it for your personal use. If you're using this idea, then you're stealing from our company. They're going to do it. You watch.
Of course they are.
And so free energy is already here. It has been forever and a day. But, you get all these naysayers out there that want to try to tell you why it is you can't do something. I mean, think about this for a second. Way back when Tesla and J.P. Morgan were doing the whole AC current thing, and they built the hydroelectric dams with Tesla's designs and all that, and basically started off the AC current deal. Mm-hmm. They didn't pay for that water that was running through there. They only had to pay for the machines, and those machines only had to be maintained. How much money does it actually cost them to maintain them machines over this long period of time? From the time they built them generators till the time they're getting free energy. Those machines paid for themselves long ago. So at some point, you would think that the people's energy bills would have at the very least went down, because it doesn't take as much to maintain them anymore. You see what I mean?
Of course.
But they didn't. They kept going up.
Yeah, that'll never happen.
Yeah.
Well, and then, we got to factor in the fact that, a dam, I don't care if it lasts for 100 years or 200 years or 300 years. Eventually, somewhere down the road, that dam is going to fail. Mother Nature is going to take it out. And boy, we look at what's happening in Orville. I mean, the scramble right now to just finish the construction of the spillway before the rain season comes in November here in California. They've got their hands full. The potential in Orville is still there. It hasn't gone away. That's just one example, Shizazz, of dams that are going to give us problems in the future. We don't need them, guys. We got to stop. They're building Site C. They're building Site C now in British Columbia. They're gonna destroy like tens of thousands of acres of land, take away from traditional homesteads from people that have been living there for like 100 years. Those homesteads are all being taken away for what? The power will never be used in British Columbia. It's going to be exported down to the United States of America, and the British Columbia taxpayer is going to pay for it. This is the kind of stuff that's going on, and try and stop it. Well, we can stop it if we get enough people together on the same page, Shizazz, and that's really important right now.
See, we have the technology available right now to literally mimic a magnetic field. We can create and collapse a magnetic field. We know how to do that. We've been doing it ever since we had the electric motor, and proof of that concept is what you got in your automobile, which is the alternator. It doesn't even have any permanent magnets in there flying past anything. You energize the main coil inside there, and that produces the magnetic field that basically produces the doggone power for your car. So we have that knowledge on how to actually do that. We could build perfect generator systems. I'm telling you, they say that, and I won't even argue that perpetual motion is possible, but the sun's still spinning for some reason in the earth. And so the water keeps moving and all that kind of stuff. The tides keep going in and out, and the wind keeps blowing. And there's all kinds of thermal vents all over the planet. So with that said, there's more than enough energy on this planet that you could literally work in perfect harmony with that would produce more energy than we would ever be able to use in 1 trillion lifetimes.
I know that. I wish people could wake up to that, because it's right in front of our faces, Shizazz. It really is. And I keep telling people, one of the things that really, I study what's going on this planet. And we know there's a lot of bull out there as far as events going on around the world, but there's a lot of truth out there. And this is what drives me to get people educated about what's going on and what's available and how we can produce power ourselves. And I'm trying to walk the walk myself right now. She says it's hard, but I'm trying to walk the walk. And I'll tell you, if everybody started doing what we're talking about, producing their own power and saying, to heck with you, Mr. Power Company, you're not really doing anything for us. All you're doing is supplying the bankers with more money. We could see a change in society, but we got to do this fairly quickly, Shizazz, because I don't think there's a lot of time. I honestly, and I'm not a fear-mongering type of guy. I really try not to put fear into anybody's heart in my conversation, but I'm realistic about what I see. And what I see is our planet dying. And if we don't change things, then our children are really going to pay the price, guys. Really? Well, how do we make the changes, Patty? How do we make the changes? We start educating each other on how we can produce power without the power companies. And when you've got power, folks, you can be self-sufficient. You can grow your own vegetables. Everything that you want can be done if you have power. Go ahead, Shizazz.
Here's the two biggest drains on your light bill. The two biggest drains is heat and cold, heating and cooling. And both of these two biggest drains could be resolved if you just understood the basic concepts of HVAC, heating and cooling. If you understood those two basic concepts, like if you pressurize the gas, it'll get hot. If you release that gas rapidly, it'll get cool. Those just basic physics right there. All right, that's how an air conditioner works. You run this compressor. It compresses the gas inside the compressor, and then it releases that gas rapidly into an expansion chamber, which does a thermal heat exchange instantaneously and produces cool air. The hot air is guided out the back, and the cool air is guided through the front. And so, with that said, all you need to know is all you have to be able to do is pressurize the gas. You can do the same thing with any of the noble gases. You can heat it up, pressurize it, because when you heat something, it expands. When you cool something, it contracts. We could build plasma water heaters, we could build plasma water heaters. We could build plasma air conditioners. We could build plasma heaters. All of them use the noble gases that if for some reason the system was breached, you wouldn't have no radioactive contamination.
Right. No threat to the human race.
Yeah.
Imagine that. Now, does that make sense or what? Everything that we talk about makes sense to me, she says. Why can't other people start seeing the urgency of what we talk about? Because there is an urgency in my voice, man. I know. I hate to reiterate on points, but I look at what's going on our planet, man, and I go, holy smokes. If we don't make catastrophic changes in the very near future, I don't believe we have a generation to do it, guys. I don't, based on what I'm seeing going on right now. It doesn't take a rocket science to figure out that if we see the breakdown in the food chain happening the way we see it right now, it's only a matter of time before it completely collapses. And when that happens, people are going to scream at the top of their voices, that we got to do something about it. Well, time is now, guys.
Two types of contamination have to be got under control. All right, in order to stop this, because radioactive contamination in water means that water temperature is going to rise. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Anybody who has a fish tank knows that you have to keep a certain temperature during the summertime and the wintertime. Otherwise, your tropical fish will die. All right, and even for freshwater fish as well, you have to maintain a certain temperature because fish are sensitive to temperature. If you get a water, like a pond outside, if a fish swims up next to the shore and that water temperature at the shore is too hot because the sun's been beaten down, you're close to a drought, for whatever reason, the side of that doggone pond, that's why in the summertime, you ain't going to see no fish swimming next to the side of the pond. They're going to be out there in the deep where it's cool, all right? Well, if they accidentally swim up into that hot spot, they're going to die. They're going to go into shock. They're going to die. That anybody who is into fish can't disagree with that. So if you understand tropical fish have certain temperatures that they can tolerate, then you can understand that if you get radioactive contamination that is heating the water, raising the water temperature in that, even if it's just a stream, all right? Once that fish swims through that water temperature, they'll literally go into shock and die. And so you'll get mass fish die-offs. You'll have fish that popping up over here. So like basically running one of those generators through the water where you shock the fish and the fish comes up to the top. That's what happened. All right. Well, the other possibility, the other one that has to be under control, the radioactive contamination is going to cause the water temperature wherever it is contaminated to rise to beyond safety levels for fish. All right, not to mention if they ingest whatever particulates are in that, then the fish no longer safe to eat as far as I'm concerned. I wouldn't want to eat radioactive tuna, but maybe I have. Anyway, the other one is that when that oil spill happened at BP, they're still to this day, to my knowledge, still pumping Corexit into the doggone ocean. Mm-hmm. That's pure ridiculousness, because think about what Corexit does. It disperses the oil. Well, don't they understand that not only people, but fish, any biological life, have oil in their body, and what's that doing to the fish? You start finding jellyfish that are like mush, because they lost their natural chemistry, and so they're dying off. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? And because of temperature differences, like hot heat rising and cold falling, you could literally have a stream of this. Like, let's say it got caught into the Gulf Stream or whatever, right? And so if you watch any kind of water dynamics, you'll see that this stuff could be sucked right out into like different levels of layers of the water. And so when the fish swim up through this kind of stuff, you think that's going to be healthy for them? You're going to have fish popping up everywhere. And once, like you said, once the food chain dies off, then, it's a chain reaction. And these folks should not be putting that chemical into the water. There were thousands of people who sent all kinds of natural ways to gather up that oil. Everything from skimmers to using straw to absorb it and everything. There were so many people that put ideas out there for them to use, but they weren't cheap enough. They weren't beneficial to the company. The company could use this chemical, and they could get the chemical for a certain amount of money, gathering up a bunch of straw or putting these buoys out to put the fuel or the oil, keep it contained, because oil floats on water. It'll stay in an area that it can't float out. You see what I mean?
Right.
And then they could pump it right off of there. They could separate the salt water and still be able to use the oil if they wanted.
Right, exactly. Well, even straw would have been a very, very simple fix for that whole situation. I mean, if they were to dump thousands of bales of straw right on top, open them up, dump them right on top of that oil, it'd suck it right out of the surface. You draw up the straw, you take away, and you dispose of it safely. Yeah. I mean, the insanity of using Corexit, I looked into it a little bit, Shizazz, and it is like dumping gas on a fire. It's insane. In 1992, I got to actually touch a 14-foot great white shark, Shizazz, because we had an El Nino come up the coast of British Columbia, and this great white got into this warm tide of water, came right up to the coast of the Queen Charlotte Islands, hit the cold water, and died, and washed up on the beaches of Masset, just around at the very top of the Queen Charlotte Islands. And a native guy found the shark and brought it over to the dock, and he sunk it and was going to let the lice eat it down to the skeleton, and eventually keep the skeleton. We've still got the head today, but I heard about it and had my dive gear with me, and I went down, and about 18 feet of water, I got to touch a 14-foot great white. I'm glad it wasn't alive.
When you said something about cold water, you kind of sparked off something in my mind that needs to be talked about because it's not usually talked about. It's not just heat that was going to be a problem. Like you said, he was in warm water and swam over into a cold water deal.
Right up, the cold water died.
The same way a tornado is created when hot air mixes with cold air creates a rotation is the same way that literally you can change the Gulf Stream by changing the temperature in that area, and you're not like heating the whole thing up at one time. You're just putting cold water one direction, heat falls, heat rises and cold air falls. Well, the same thing happens in water. There's a rotation going on in water because of the temperature difference of these waters merging. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And so you can shift warm water where these fish were normally in cold water and vice versa. Well, when you do that, like I said, nature has everything balanced out for a reason. All right? And when you tamper with nature and you put hot water where there should be cold water and vice versa, those fish are already accustomed to living in that temperature. A sudden temperature change is what kills the fish.
Right.
You see what I mean? So it's not just heat that's going to harm the fish. It's cold in the wrong place.
Well, we're seeing reports, and I urge people, there is sites on the internet that are reporting on mass BC die-off events worldwide on a daily basis. And what we're seeing in 2017 now, Shizazz, as I've been following these die-offs, we're seeing an incredible spike in reports of die-offs. So the numbers are going up every year. The numbers have gone up every year since I started looking back in 2011, 2012. I started studying the events, the actual reported mass die-off events being reported around the planet. And what I've done is I've gone to these reports and I've vetted the information and make sure that the information is coming from credible resources, and it's not bull. And if you study this now, Shizazz, you're seeing an incredible spike in reports of die-offs happening around the planet.
That's because all this craziness is causing an imbalance in nature. If you got a flock of birds that live on this particular island that are normally used to eating a certain type of fish, and now those fish, because of temperature difference, part of them died off, the other part of them went the other direction because they were trying to get to more comfortable waters, then those fish ain't they got to try to fly somewhere and find some food. Well, How far can you fly before you starve? And that when you talked about what they dump in the air, imagine you're a bird and you got a really fast, small respiratory system. You're flapping your wings through the air and you fly into a cloud of what they call chemtrails, aluminum and barium oxide, and you suck that all up in your lungs, and how you think you're going to fare. Like I said, it ceases to be a conspiracy theory when birds start dropping from the sky. And the news tried to tell you it was fireworks that did it.
Well, we're seeing these events. Well, we're seeing it happen all over the planet right now, and people really got to pay attention to it. They
better get up. They better wake up and start doing something about it. Because literally, when the food chain starts to collapse, it's a chain reaction. That's all there is to it.
Well, that was the point I was making earlier, buddy. How much more can the food chain take before it does collapse? Is that a question we want to be asking ourselves?
Yeah. Well,
I don't want to ask that question, but I'm asking it now.
Right now, we have solutions in order to resolve these problems, but it's got to take some doggone common sense. It's got to take some people getting out there and talking to people that are in power or whatever, your representatives, and actually telling them, look, there are people out here who know the solutions in order to resolve these problems. You can't throw nature off balance without nature fighting back with a vengeance. I'm telling you, the secret to free energy is that when we produce energy, we're not creating it. We're not doing anything fancy. All we're doing is basically throwing nature off balance. And in the process of nature balancing itself back out, we gather up that energy and we run our lights and our electric motor. It's essentially as easy as that. They ain't nothing to it. A battery or a capacitor is just a couple of plates with a, maybe electrolyte or a dielectric in between the center of, depending on which one we're talking about. But you charge one plate higher than the other, and as nature's trying to balance those plates back out from positive to negative or vice versa, then you use that electrical flow in the process to run your lights. That's it. And once nature balances out, you got a dead battery. That's what nature does with everything that we're talking about. It balances itself out. Now, the world itself has all the time in the world. The people of the world don't have all the time in the world, because we need to be, like right now, trying to help nature heal itself, because all the damage being done by the idiocy of the companies and corporations out there that think it's okay just to dump crud down the river. I mean, like the EPA, when they busted the hole in the mine and dumped all that crud down the river. What was that, Colorado or something like that? Mm-hmm. Well, then they told those people, said, oh, ain't no big deal. Wait for the crud to float by, and then you can drink the water again. Seriously? You shouldn't have done it to begin with, first off, because you're the Environmental Protection Agency, you doggone idiots. Anyway, when they stop doing the stupid stuff and polluting the fishbowl, and allow nature to do what nature's supposed to do, we can still enjoy all the luxuries of life and air conditioning and computer technology and all that without, dumping crud down everywhere. We can make things that work so incredibly efficient that you barely have to burn any coal in order to produce steam. Literally.
We know this now, Fizz. That's what drives me crazy. I know all this technology is there, yet the human race in general still is in their little paradigm. And they just don't want to see what you and me see, and a lot of people sitting in right now listening to this understand that there's a very, I believe, a small window of opportunity that if we don't get people actively involved and screaming at the top of their lungs about changes that need to be made, then we are really, truly doomed as a race. And I don't want to say that sounding like a fearmonger, but I got to be realistic about
You're right, though. You're right. We're on the path we are. We're heading. Yeah, we're doomed. But look, there's one subject out there that every single time I talk about, I catch so much grief, because there's some really educated people out there. They can quote every single deal about how to build an internal combustion engine and all the mathematics involved and all the calculations, everything. They can sit there and they can quote it all out. And they can quote the laws of physics, and all this kind of stuff. And I say that you could literally design an internal combustion engine that would run on pure distilled water without any kind of additive to it whatsoever, and I catch so much grief you wouldn't possibly imagine. All right, now, Stan Myers was driving around in a dune buggy in the 1970s running on water. He was using radio frequencies and customized injectors to literally run that car on water. All right, and we have the technology now to literally design an engine using all existing technology, everything from induction heating to compression ignition, like diesel engines. Diesel engines use compression ignition. They don't have a spark plug. They use like a glow plug long enough to heat up the cylinders. And once the cylinders are up to temperature, then they use the compression and the heat inside that cylinder to burn the diesel fuel, which runs the truck down the road.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but we can make these things so super efficient, there wouldn't be no carbon emissions coming out. Even though I'm not afraid of carbon emissions, because I understand them, if they say that we got to reduce our pollution, our carbon emissions, okay, fine. We'll go your route. Let's do it. Let's design these engines to literally run with zero carbon emissions, which is more than scientifically proven possible.
Right.
And let's get it done and stop arguing about it. Right now, I hear the protesters, I hear the government, but I see no action. That's why I call it mad science. That's why I get pissed off, because I know the answer is right there in front of their face.
Yeah, it's frustrating to say the least.
They got to tax me.
Hey, listen, Shizazz, we're down to the last 4 minutes. That hour went by really, really fast. I could talk with you for another 2 hours. But listen, in the last couple of minutes here, why don't you plug your radio station and where people can tune in on Saturday mornings and listen about free energy? And then I'll close the show out with a couple thoughts, buddy.
Thank you. Thanks again for having me, Barry. Look, folks, if you really want to get down to the brass tacks of it, join us on the Mad Science Show. It's 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Central on Saturdays for Mad Science at www.shazizzradio.com. And if you jump into the super chat room, you get access to 3 chat rooms for one, and we can add more chat rooms. So if you know anybody who wants to throw another chat room in there, we'll have even bigger super chat. But either way, for Mad Science on Saturdays and for the Knights of the Round Table, which is a show that I think you'd enjoy, where we talk about solutions to things in this world. And so with that said, join me over there, jump over there and say hi to me on my YouTube channel, and I'll show you some Mad Science. Peace and love, everybody. Take care.
Well, hey, Shizazz, thanks again for joining me. And going forward, folks, in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be talking about solutions. And one of the solutions that I never even got to talk about today, and it's one that just fills me with hope for the human race, of course, is cannabis. I have Rick Simpson joining me next Friday morning. Rick is author of a book called Learning from the Cure. You can find him on the internet. He's the founder of Phoenix Cures, and he is a true crusader worldwide in the effects of cannabis oil on medical disorders in the human body. So I hope
Barry,
you join me next Friday morning. Go ahead.
We need to do another show on cannabis because there's also 2 other things out there you can make biofuel and fertilizer out of all naturally, which is watermelon duckweed, man.
I know, Shizazz.
You know, we're going to get it for free.
I know. I mean, you know, Henry Ford was going to power all our automobiles with an ethanol-based hemp fuel until the Morgans and the Chases and the Rothschilds came along and put a stop to that, guys. That's history, and that's a fact. And if that had happened,
do that show, let me know. I'll join you.
Well, I'm going to have Rick. I talked to Rick Simpson. Rick's a very good friend of mine, and he's going to join me next Friday morning. I've done, I don't know, probably 20 shows with Rick in the last 5 years. He honestly, folks, was the person responsible for waking me up to what can be done with cannabis. Before that, I was kind of like in the dark and really not paying attention, but he inspired me. And I started on this journey 5 years ago, and now that I know what can be done with cannabis, what it can do for the human race, how it can change our world literally upside down and give us the planet that we want to live on, it'll be the focus of a lot of my conversations going forward. The week after that, I've got Dr. David Allen going to be joining me, and he's one of the leading researchers in the world on the effects and the wonders of the endocannabinoid system in the human body. So I'm looking forward to the next couple of weeks because I am going to offer solutions. We live in a very dismal world with all kinds of negatives around us, but we can change it. We can change it simply by demanding that hemp be brought back into our society, widespread. The effects on our society, guys, would just boggle our minds, and we can do it. We can, but we have to raise our voices together. One voice is not going to be heard, but a million will. And we got to, at this point in history, guys, I look back, I'm 60, almost 63 years old now, and I look what's happening to my planet. I look at the pile of crap that I'm leaving for my children. And, you know, I'm sometimes it might sound corny, but I'm talking from my heart. My focus right now is trying to find solutions and opening people's eyes to the solutions that we have, and that we got to implement them, guys. We do, or else our children are really, really going to be suffering the price. So I hope you join me next Friday, and I hope you tune in and listen to what Rick has to say. He's truly an inspiring individual, and I look forward to doing these shows in the future going forward. And thanks again to Lonnie for giving me this Friday morning spot, and UCY for providing this platform to share some of our thoughts. Last thought of you before we go today, Shizazz?
Well, I'll tell you what, folks, the answers are there. We got every single answer. We're sitting here waiting at the gate, waiting for everybody to come together and just do it, man. Look, there. If you want free energy, it's there.
Next week, guys. Love ya.
Great show, man. Trying to cram all that information into one deal. Well, Barry, looks like Thomas is trying to get a hold of his office. All right, thanks again.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.tv.